So today I think we should take a look at why Anakin Skywalker is such a young kid in episode 1 and why so many people have a problem with that and why it's actually a pretty good decision, or the best decision actually, for the series. A lot of people were really thrown off by the fact that Darth Vader is such a little kid and such an innocent little kid coming straight from Return of the Jedi to The Phantom Menace. And that age gap from episode 1 to episode 2 is a big 10-year jump, so that's a lot for people to process and probably made people confused as to why the story didn't just show more of Anakin's training and slow down his transition from Jedi to Sith rather than rushing it in just 2 films. But actually, I think that when you take it all together, it's much better to have Anakin start as such a young kid. There's a famous saying, to start the story where the story starts, and by that people mean don't start before the action does. For example, if your character lives a normal life up until the age of 12 and then goes and becomes an adventurer, you should start the story when they're 12, because the first 11 years are normal to us and not interesting and not related to the core of the story. And I think that's where a lot of people have problems with Anakin being such a young 9-year-old and so innocent at the start of The Phantom Menace. They see it as unnecessary filler to just show us his childhood. And they think that the real story starts when Anakin becomes a Jedi. And that's kind of true if you look at it from the certain perspective that the story is about the Jedi Anakin Skywalker falling to the dark side and then being redeemed as a Jedi, and the balance of the Force and the plot in that sense. But there's a difference between plot and story, and the plot is what actually happens, whereas the story is about the arcs of the characters and the emotional core and what actually happens to the characters internally. So while the plot of Star Wars may really kick off in Attack of the Clones with the start of the Clone Wars and Palpatine scheming and when Anakin's already a Jedi, and conclude with Darth Vader defeating the Emperor and the rebels defeating the Death Star. But the actual story of Star Wars at the core of it all is Anakin Skywalker's internal struggle with the light and dark in himself and the family dynamics that it creates. So the actual story of Star Wars itself starts with Anakin's emotional journey, which begins when he has to leave his family on Tatooine, which is why The Phantom Menace is the beginning of the story. And the reason we skip over all of his training from a young age to Attack of the Clones is because none of that is unique to Anakin's emotional journey. All of that is generic Jedi things that we already can easily infer from the other Jedi that we've seen. The story of Star Wars really jumps around from point to point on Anakin's emotional beats. So The Phantom Menace is about Anakin's struggle leaving his mother and his fear of doing that, but the fact that he overcomes that fear to do it for the greater good of his own life and what he sees as the greater good for the galaxy, as him being a Jedi. Then Attack of the Clones is about Anakin's struggle with his love for Padme and his struggle to be the proper Jedi apprentice, even after all his training. And then Revenge of the Sith is very clearly Anakin's struggle of turning to the dark side and fighting to save the things that he's afraid to lose, and in the end losing them all because of that. And then even in Rogue One, all of our Vader scenes are basically showing how broken and detached Anakin is at the lowest point in his life, where he's just become a mechanical monster doing the Empire's bidding. Which brings us to A New Hope, which is basically a continuation of that theme in Rogue One, where Anakin is just a servant of the Empire, but the core of him there is actually his confrontation with Obi-Wan, where he is forced to remember and relive his past, which pushes him to go find Luke in Empire Strikes Back. In The Empire Strikes Back, we have Luke's main focus of the story, of course, as we do with many of the movies, where Anakin is not the sole main character. But even there, a lot of the emotional focus is on Vader's struggle with chasing Luke, finding out Luke is his son, figuring out how he wants to handle that, and how he wants to approach Luke in the end. And then everything concludes in Return of the Jedi with the end of Anakin's arc, where he's finally addressed by Luke and shown that he still has some good in him, and inspired to remember that he still has the power to save people he cares about if he actually continues trying, despite how poorly it went for him earlier. And so once Anakin learns that he does have the power to save the people he cares about, and if he's careful about it, he can actually do it correctly and do it well, then he's able to finally overthrow the Emperor and overthrow his own demons to save Luke. And then he dies as not redeemed for the galaxy, but redeemed for himself and his own family, and to the Jedi as he finally becomes a Force ghost. So when people say that Anakin is too young in The Phantom Menace, and it's just an unnecessary glimpse into Darth Vader's childhood, it's really not unnecessary. It may be unnecessary to the plot of Star Wars, but it's extremely important for actually attaching to Anakin as a character and watching his full emotional journey from wide-eyed innocent kid to powerful destroyer of everything, to finally recovering and being the person who saves his family, meaning in this case his son and his daughter. A lot of people have also commented on Jake Lloyd's acting as young Anakin, and obviously that led to a lot of bullying and problems for him later in his life. And I'm not sure how people really feel about it these days, actually, but I've never really had a problem with it, and I thought it was actually pretty good, because a lot of people have problems with child actors because they're supposedly bad at acting, which, if it's a teenager who's a bad actor, then sure, they can ruin a character. I've seen The Last Airbender.
My name is Ang, and I'm the Avatar.
But when it comes to really little kids, I think actually the bad acting can even enhance the character in certain ways. Definitely a good actor is a good actor, no question about that. You can look at Iron Man 3 and Real Steel for examples of that.
Come on, what do you do?
Just breathe. Really, just breathe. You're a mechanic, right?
Right.
You said so.
Yes, I did.
Why don't you just build something? Migi, he died.
Whoa, what was that? Was that Japanese?
Apakato Nikai.
Let me see if I can reset him to English. Hang on.
How the hell do you know Japanese?
Video games.
You play video games in Japanese?
Japanese bootlegs are always better.
But even a bad child actor is still a real child. So the essence that they bring to the character, even if it's bad acting, is a definite real-life childlike quality that can enhance the character a lot, I think. For example, a lot of people think that Jake Lloyd's delivery as young Anakin was pretty wooden and stiff.
I built a racer. It's the fastest ever. There's a big race tomorrow on Boonta Eve. You could enter my pod.
Anakin, Watto won't let you.
Watto doesn't know I've built it. You could make him think it was yours and get him to let me pilot it for you.
I don't want you to race. It's awful. I die every time Watto makes you do it.
But Mom, I love it. The prize money would more than pay for the parts they need.
But to be fair, you can consider that Anakin has pretty stunted emotional development, and I think that's a thing that a lot of people miss about the prequels. Anakin grew up on a desert planet as a slave, with his only real connection being his mother, and his only other connection being slave masters like Watto, who he admits beat him and obviously verbally abuse him, and definitely don't have the emotional warmth that a child needs. So it's pretty clear that Anakin grows up pretty stunted, mostly living with machines and focused on his slave labor. So it makes sense that his speech and his personality are pretty stunted. And that's something that actually carries through Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith as well. In the outside real world, you can see that as Jake Lloyd wasn't a very good child actor. Hayden Christensen was a better actor than him in Attack of the Clones, but not very good. And then by Revenge of the Sith, Hayden Christensen had gotten a lot better at acting. And then in the original trilogy, of course, James Earl Jones has that amazing voice acting. And that's one way to see it. But I think that another more interesting way to see it for the story of Star Wars is Anakin starts out very emotionally stunted. And you can see that for sure when he's a child, how awkward he is.
Are you an angel?
What?
An angel.
And then when he finally is an adult with Padme, you can see him trying to flirt with zero experience and knowledge, and he's still just the awkward, emotionally stunted boy.
I don't like sand. It's coarse and rough and irritating, and it gets everywhere. Not like here. Here everything is soft and smooth.
And then, after a few years of war and a few years of being with Padme and more experience on missions and being a Jedi Knight, and with the Clone Wars, more experience being with Ahsoka even, you can see that he definitely loosens up a lot, and he's able to crack more jokes, and he's more smooth in his delivery, and he's more confident in his ideas, even if they go in the wrong direction. And then, of course, by the time he's Vader, he's very smooth and very confident in his speech.
Perhaps you think you're being treated unfairly?
No.
Good. It would be unfortunate if I had to leave the garrison here.
But ironically, he's lost a lot of his humanity by that point. But another thing that people have problems with from The Phantom Menace of Anakin being so young is that the origin of the love story between him and Padme is a little bit awkward because of how young they are and because of the age gap. And that definitely makes sense and it's definitely valid, but it does fit the story, and it would have fit the story a lot better if they had kept in some additional deleted scenes from Attack of the Clones, showing more of Padme's side of things.
Why haven't you told us about him?
What's there to talk about? He's just a boy.
A boy? Have you seen the way he looks at you?
Sola, stop it.
It's obvious he has feelings for you.
Anakin and I are friends. Our relationship is strictly professional.
But that part of it plays into Anakin's inexperience too, where he's such a young, innocent, naive kid at the beginning that he makes all sorts of interesting, weird, taboo, awkward decisions, and that continues all the way through the prequels until he's finally confident in himself and finally brave and strong in everything that he wanted to be. But in becoming such an adult and brave and strong and tough and determined and everything like that he meant to be from the beginning, he ends up losing the things that are most important to him. I think that's a very strong message for everyone, but one that I think is especially powerful for young boys. The warning that as you grow up, you have to learn to be strong and to be brave and to take care of yourself and take care of others and do everything on your own terms as much as possible, because that's part of becoming an adult. But you also have to be careful that as you gain more power like that, you don't lose sight of the things that are actually most important. And you don't forget the innocence and the naivete and the soul that you had when you were a child. To become an adult, you have to let go of all of your childhood things. And then once you become an adult, your next mission is to regain back all of your childhood things and integrate them into your adult life. And I think that's almost a lot like the process that we see Anakin going through for his coming of age story. And you can see that for Luke as well. So for Anakin, he starts out as a naive, innocent child who just wants to help everyone. And then he grows up and he loses a lot of that and he takes on a lot of new responsibilities like the war and taking care of Padme and being a Jedi. And he becomes a great Jedi, but in the process of doing that, he loses sight of the most important things to him. And sadly, in Anakin's case, he actually destroys a lot of it. And in the end, his most important job near the end of his life is finally learning and remembering to reincorporate that childlike innocence back into the power that he has as an adult. And that finally lets him use his power for something actually good, to actually save the people he cares about and actually fight against evil. And that's very important. And then for Luke, with his coming of age story, we have a very similar journey, where Luke starts out as the naive, innocent farm boy who blows up the Death Star. and then he gets totally beat by Vader and the world. And then he finally accomplishes his Jedi training and takes on responsibilities of leading the rebels and saving Han in the beginning of Return of the Jedi. And by the end, he finds that he's totally destroying Vader, and he has all this power and all of this responsibility and all of this control, but he's using it in a way that is not really him and is not really right. And so in the end, when Luke says that he will not fight Vader anymore, and he will not fight the Emperor anymore, that's really Luke coming back to his childlike innocence and reincorporating it into his own adult power in a way that it actually gets the results he wants by finding that power to inspire Vader to save him. So whenever people talk about why Anakin is such a young child in The Phantom Menace, and if that was a really bad decision, or if that actually adds to the story, I think it's clear that it's a very important piece of the puzzle. The story of Darth Vader is a dark and intense one of the rise and fall, but to really get the full picture, you need the full rise, and you need to know where he's going back to at the fall and the rise again. You have to see Darth Vader as a young, innocent child because that's where his emotional journey started, and that's where his conclusion ends. When Vader is dying at the end and he takes on Emperor Palpatine, and he finally looks at Luke with his own eyes and saves his own son, that's not Anakin the Jedi from Attack of the Clones. That's Anakin the young, innocent kid who wants to save everyone from the Phantom Menace. And I think that's a pretty great thing that George Lucas cared to include that whole arc from Anakin's innocent childhood rather than just skipping to the action. But anyway, I'm interested to hear what your thoughts are. What do you think of the new video style? Did it work for you, or should I go back to the scripts? And did you like this rambling deep dive into Anakin's childhood and the Phantom Menace? Let me know what you think in the comments below. Like the video and subscribe, and I'll see you around next time.